let's talk about pronouns, what they are, why they're important, and how you can find the ones that fit for you. So you may not know this, but today, October 20th, is International Pronouns Day. And most people are probably familiar with common pronouns like she, her, hers, and he, him, his. But there are many more for people who identify as non-binary, or really any identity that is outside the binary or not exclusively man or woman. But why do pronouns matter? And why, more specifically, do the correct pronouns matter? Why do using the correct pronouns matter? We gender people, and in some languages, objects too, all of the time, often without really even thinking about it. It's kind of like a reaction or a reflex. And we often use pronouns based on assumptions about how we interpret the appearance of others, how we interpret their gender expression. The default is often something like she for someone who appears feminine, he for someone who appears masculine. And for a lot of people, it kind of just ends there because most people don't realize that there are other pronouns outside of that. As many of you in the trans community probably know, it's not always helpful to assume someone's pronouns simply based off of things like clothing, accessory, their behaviors, their voice, and more. It's important to not send this message that people need to look a certain way in order for certain pronouns or identities to be valid or correct. It's the classic idea that trans women, and cis women for that matter, don't owe anyone femininity, and trans and cis men don't owe anyone masculinity, and non-binary people don't owe anyone androgyny. For many people, their gender expression does align with, their identity and the pronouns that you use. Like for me as a trans woman who typically presents very femininely and uses she, her pronouns. But there's also for many people, gender expression may not perfectly align or align at all with the pronouns they use and the identity they hold. And that's perfectly okay and perfectly valid. Because again, gender expression and gender identity are distinct. They're often connected, but they're distinct entities. So, long story short, don't assume. And if you need to know, ask. What pronouns do you use? Things like that. Don't ask like invasive or presumptuous questions like, are you a man or a woman? Because that can be invalidating to non-binary people. And if you're like, are you a man? That can be invalidating to anybody who doesn't identify as a man. It's very presumptuous in the way you'd ask a question like that. And if this person in question is not around and you don't know their pronouns, use their name. Or like I just did, use they, them, theirs pronouns. Pronouns that are commonly used by not only some non-binary people, but also used in place of, when we don't know the identity or pronouns that an individual uses. When this person in question, their pronouns are not yet known. And yes, they, them can be used in the singular. It has been for hundreds of years, and it is common practice in writing when the gender of the person is unknown or doesn't need to be known if it's kind of like a generic person. Don't be that person who says they can't respect or use they, them pronouns for a person because they, them isn't singular. Just like the word you, it can be used both in the singular and the plural. It just depends on the context. And relating to not making assumptions, it's important to respect people's pronouns. Why is this? Because using the wrong pronouns, whether it's intentional or not, sends the message that you're not seeing the individual, not referring to the individual the way they identify and the way they probably want to be seen. And of course, it depends on the person in terms of how okay someone is with the wrong pronouns being used to describe them, especially if it's unintentional incorrect use. And some people are okay with multiple different pronouns being used for them. Like, see people who identify with she and they, or he and they, or maybe she, he, and they. But the important piece here is that each person knows their own identity, their own pronouns better than anyone else. It's not up to me, it's not up to you to decide what identity someone does or doesn't have, or what pronouns they do or don't use. Their gender identity is valid, and besides, it takes a lot of energy to go out of your way to refuse to use someone's pronouns. And it's also just kind of not nice to intentionally use the wrong pronouns or other terms that may be invalidating to someone. And you may have heard this phrase, preferred pronouns, before. Some people are fine with this description, but personally, I lean more towards just calling them pronouns or personal pronouns. I think that's much better, because think about it this way. I'm a woman, I'm a trans woman, I identify with she, her pronouns. I don't prefer to use she, her pronouns. I use she, her pronouns because that reflects who I am and how I identify. I personally think that putting preferred there in front can minimize the importance for many people of using the correct pronouns. But I do recognize that some people are okay with the use of the word preferred. It's just not what I would prefer to use. Like I've heard some people that maybe identify with multiple different pronouns, they're maybe okay with that because they might prefer one over the other, but they're okay with different pronouns also being used. In that context, I think it makes sense. But for many people that only identify with one set of pronouns, preferred may not be the best way to describe that. But what happens if you make a mistake? Simply apologize, correct yourself, and move on. Don't make a big deal about it. Profusely apologizing can not only be embarrassing or create a scene for the person that you misgendered, especially if you're in public, that can draw unnecessary attention to them, but it also makes it a little more about you than it is about them and the fact that you misgendered them. Just move on and try not to let it happen again. If you're struggling to remember someone's pronouns, practice when they aren't around so that way you can get it right when they are. Also, be an ally. If someone uses the wrong pronouns for someone else, provide a simple correction. Actually, this person uses she, her pronouns. Chloe uses she, her pronouns. And being an ally also involves correcting people when the person in question is not around to defend themselves or correct themselves. Don't respect someone's pronouns to their face and then misgender them behind their back, and don't let others get away with it either. It can also be tiring or stressful for trans people to always have to correct others. So I'd also recommend asking them what they would like to do if someone misgenders them. They may want to make the correction themselves, or they may want you to step up for them. So it's important to not assume that they're going to make the correction. It's important not to assume that they want you to jump in and make the correction for them. Everybody has their different ways of approaching this. In closing, I think it's important to go over a few examples of pronouns, and this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but here are some of the ones out there. Of course, as I've said, we have he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. We have ze, zer, zers, ze, them, zers, vi, ver, vers, per, pers, am, ers, and fe, fair, fairs. And hopefully I pronounced all of these correctly. I know, again, that there are more out there, but let me know down in the comments below, what pronouns do you use, whether I included them in the list or not. Let everybody know how you like to be referred to as in terms of your pronouns. And maybe you don't know yet, and that's okay. We can have a conversation about that too. How did you come to identify with these pronouns if you have a set of pronouns that you use? What do you do if you make a mistake about someone else's pronouns? And what do you prefer others to do if they use the pronouns for you or someone else? Let me know all of this and so much more below. And also check out the description below for some links to other resources on pronouns that may help you on your journey, whether you're finding some new pronouns for yourself or you're an ally of, trans and non-binary people in your life and you just want to learn more. And as always, Tipsy and I love you all and hope you're staying safe and sound. If you have not done so already, please be sure to give this a huge thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and notification bell. I love you all. Bye for now.